Welcome everyone to Vital Life Energies podcast with Jeff and Lorraine. Today's podcast will be covering a topic on the vagus nerve from the cervicals in the neck at the back of the brainstem down to the S123, the parasympathetic nerves above in the neck to below at the S123 in the sacrum, and balancing with the S4 and 5, the sympathetic nerves. We hope you're all doing well. We know it's very challenging and things are changing very fast day to day for you all. We just want to share our knowledge with you all and to keep the faith, keep the courage, and to spread our love around the world.
Thank you, Lorraine. What I want to say today is that we've been dealing with viruses for a long, long time. We've been talking about viruses now in our work and our sharing with people for, 25, 30 years. And now we're dealing with this virus originally activating from China in the lab, from the original virus that activated in SARS in 2002, 2003, when we were in Manly, Lorraine and I, working out of the Nature Care Clinic. That's when it activated the SARS-1 coming from China. At that time, it was the bird flu, and it spreads through mucus. And literally, in order to protect yourself, you needed to have like a mask. I told Lorraine at the time when we were looking at the tongue as a form of analysis, because the tongue's full of blood, and it actually, it's 9% of the blood is on the tongue. And you can see the reading of the constitution and also the whole digestive system in the colon from looking at the tongue, which of course back in the 30s and 40s, and the doctors, you'd look at tongue. My mom was a nurse and she used to look at my tongue. If it was green, she knew it was a major infection, viral infection. If it was yellow, it was viral infection there. If it was white, it was bacteria. So they could see the actual infection of the virus by the coloration in the tongue and the infection in the colon. But now, I told Lorraine, please don't look at the tongue anymore. We'll do the eye, which we do the iris analysis, which shows every part of the body through the whole constitution and the actual nerve of the fibers of the eye to the nerves in the whole body. The situation now is that SARS-1 and 2 at that time was then active, and we said at that time, please lower your levels of estrogen. Please don't eat any chicken, veal, pork, or turkey because the virus lives in estrogen. Well, the problem today is that in our large cities, we're full of chemical, and the chemical actually is what's called xenoestrogen. So the virus lives in the cities and spreads in the cities because of the xenoestrogen, the chemical that goes into the liver and easily spreads. So now, recently, in China, it's pretty well known now. In the lab there, they wanted to activate and spread the virus more to humans versus from animals. So then what they did is they activated what's called the herpes simplex virus. That's the spike protein that's in this pathogen, that's in the actual, what they call as vaccine. So that spike protein burns. And so then it activated the SARS-1 and 2 that would normally go into your lungs to actually go into the air. So instead of being mucus, it's now, which the mask actually very effective against the mucus, it's now going from a very mucusy, you have to actually spit on someone to get it, or have close contact with someone, it's not airborne, then turn into a nanovirus. A nano means you have to look at a microscope. And so the Epstein-Barr herpes simplex was attached to SARS virus and made this airborne. That's the reason it's able to spread throughout the world and spread very easily. And it will, of course, burn because of the herpes simplex, because we all carry the Epstein-Barr in the cerebral spinal fluid in our spine. Certain, what we call diseases, which we don't treat disease, cancer, of the blood is called leukemia. That's the Epstein-Barr, the burning of the virus. Herpes, which we know, right to it in our mouth and the genital area. That same burning, which is the herpes simplex, Epstein-Barr, which as far as burns, this is the COVID-19, So then very simply, it burns the blood, and we call that leukemia. Okay, the Epstein-Barr, again, you can Google it, you'll see what I'm saying. Goes into lymph, we call it lymphoma. So everything we need to do is to neutralize this burning that's occurring in the body. Anything that causes inflammation, nitrogen, the virus can easily spread. Now, originally, when this virus activated, is affecting older people because the virus would actually go from the bone marrow, the reproductive area, go into the colon, it burn the reproductive immune system, which is made in the bone marrow. The T cells, stem cells, white blood cells, red blood cells, and the platelets are all made in the bone marrow, the cerebrospinal fluid marrow. Then it would go from there into, which is where our immune system starts, the non-essential nutrients that we take to strengthen our immune system and strengthen the bone marrow, which is the cerebrospinal fluid is made up of those amino acids and minerals and vitamins. Then that goes where our immune system starts, and it goes directly into our colon. And of course, the colon's job is to activate oxygen and make melatonin, serotonin, dopamine, and to actually activate that oxygen that's made in the liver and the bone marrow to go upward into our lungs so we can absorb oxygen externally from our lungs. But now it's actually burning from the same Epstein-Barr, and the excess estrogen, the chemical, is going from the lung, from the colon. Everything drains up into the brain, we go to sleep. So it goes into the lungs, and the villi that's in the colon starts to get sticky with the infection. It can't absorb the oxygen in the blood every 2 minutes. It goes into the lungs. It starts to burn the lungs. We're supposed to get oxygen externally from, which originally was our gills in the lungs when we were in the womb. Now it's actually forming in the lungs to get oxygen and the air. So now the villi in the lungs is all sticky, so it cannot get as much oxygen, so our oxygen levels drop. Well, if our oxygen levels drop, we have more carbon dioxide. That's the reason they put the people on ventilators and like that and put them on oxygen, because they weren't able to keep the oxygen. We live off of oxygen as human beings.
We also have to remove the carbon dioxide. There's a balance, just like we talked about right at the beginning for you all about the nerves in the neck, the parasympathetic nerves, the same nerves below the parasympathetic nerves, S1, 2, 3 in the sacrum are the parasympathetic nerves. So the parasympathetic nerves is the assimilation, the oxygen. The parasympathetic nerves is the sleep, is the healing. The sympathetic is the exhalation, is the elimination, is the detoxification. All right, so that's the sympathetic. So it's all about balancing above and below, below to above, from within out, from the head down, and balancing the inhalation, the exhalation, the assimilation, the elimination. So yes, we live off oxygen. We also need to remove the carbon dioxide. And that's the reason that right now, where we're having to use a face covering is detrimental, not just to us emotionally and mentally, because our smile is how we touch and we reach each other, how we greet each other is through our eyes, the windows of the soul, and through our smile. And that is being covered up. And so that's on the emotional, the physical level, the emotional and mental level obviously is being affected, which is the reason this is so hard on the children, our children. And then we go to the understanding of now the carbon dioxide, you're not exhaling out all the carbon dioxide, it's being trapped and you're breathing that back in. And if you've been using that same mask for more than a week, there's probably more bacteria in that mask than a toilet seat.
So in that carbon dioxide that you're not able to release then goes back up into the brain and back into your blood. And because this virus is a parasite, and parasites live off of carbon dioxide, then it activates, fuels the parasite to spread more, the virus to spread through the activation of the carbon dioxide. But then oxygen, the virus cannot live in oxygen. So the more oxygen we breathe in, that's the reason what Lauren's explaining, the more we actually inhale the oxygen, then that activates the body's immune system to recognize the pathogen of the virus and spreads that through our bloodstream and through our lymph. Then we exhale out all the carbon dioxide and we actually eliminate the actual toxin, the bacteria that's actually feeding the virus, and the toxin that the virus is actually eliminating, because the virus actually lays eggs and that's how it spreads throughout the body.
So
So in simplicity,
it's very
go ahead.
important that everybody understands it's the chemicals now. That's the reason we've shared this, back when this first broke out, about using air filters in your homes and filtering the air, because the chemicals are mimicking xenoestrogen. So it's mimicking more estrogen. That's what these viruses have something to attach to. The xenoestrogen creates like a plaque, a sticky plaque. Doesn't create, it creates like a plaque. And so then the parasites, the viruses, they have something to attach to.
So the more that we can actually remove that plaque is by activating more oxygen and activating our immune system.
And
It's
through
our
the
immune
liver,
system.
through our liver and our bone marrow, right? Our liver, through the amino acids, regenerate. Through the liver, we activate the methylation within the liver, the chelation through the liver, through the amino acids, right? Chelation, all right? So the methylation within the liver is important, even more so now for everyone, now than ever, is as long as the liver is chelating out the chemicals daily. When we sleep, what Jeff was sharing about, when we sleep, the lymph drains up where we sleep, drains up into our brain. We eliminate 2 pounds of plaque every night from our brain while we sleep. Of course, we're covering the vagus nerve from the neck and the sympathetic nerves, the parasympathetic nerves in the neck to below.
So what Lorraine's explaining is that in that vagus nerve that's in the back of the neck, that vagus nerve has a direct relationship to activating the parasympathetic nerves, activating the body's ability within the liver itself, which is filtering out the chemical through the amino acids, the methionine, then the mineral magnesium, and the cysteine, which makes the red blood cells. That filters out the chemical, because that's what the liver's job is to do, is just a filter of xenoestrogen chemical. And because in large cities and foods that we eat and water we drink and air we breathe has more and more of the chemical in it. So we're more contaminated within the liver with this chemical, and the virus is attached to the chemical and spread. So as long as we have a healthy liver, that's methionine, cysteine, and like that, and the magnesium, that mineral, then that activates more red blood cells, more oxygen. The body can start to eliminate that out, and the oxygen levels can actually go back up and activate that oxygen through the entire digestive system. So that's what Lorraine's saying about the liver is so important in the relation of filtration now with this particular pathogen. And so now what's happening is that the actual virus itself is actually living in the carbon dioxide and is affected actual brain itself, which is the herpes simplex. It's actually gone from the reproductive area up into the colon, up into the lungs, and into the brain. So if we can activate more oxygen levels within our blood, more oxygen in the reproductive area, and activate what's called the vagus nerve, because the vagus nerve itself is what regulates the brain in itself to be able to maintain the oxygen levels and activate all the glands to maintain oxygen, which is the parasympathetic nerves. The parasympathetic nerves is what activates the rehydration, elimination, and activates the body's ability to heal. It's the relaxation that activates in the first 3 hours in our sleep is the parasympathetic nerves. And in relationship from going from the top of the head, the vagus nerve, the back of the neck, it goes all through all the glands, all the way down to the lower back, the sacrum. And in the sacral nerves is S1, S2, and S3. That's the parasympathetic nerves. That's the healing process that we've been dealing with. So everything we're doing with our program is to activate that vagus nerve, activate the liver regeneration, and activate the healing in all the glands. And then the other thing we need to do, which is just really very important, which people are not able to really focus on, is actually activating the bone marrow to make the T cell stem cells, make the make the stem cells, make the red blood cells, the white blood cells, and the platelets to regenerate the tissue, recognize the virus, and eliminate it. And that's one of the most important things we've been focusing on with the Castle Packs, with everything we've been teaching. And so one of the things that I turned to from my original teacher, Dr. Stone of Players Therapy, he's been saying about the relationship of the vagus nerve as the parasympathetic, and then the lower, which is called S4 and S5, which is the sympathetic nerves within the buttock, which strengthens our immune system to get the circulation up and boost up our white blood cell function to strengthen our immunity. So this is what this is coming from Dr. Stone, balancing. The upper portion of the gludi is also supplied by the 3 sacral parasympathetic nerves. These must be balanced with the upper parasympathetic vagus nerve, which is what Lorraine's been talking about, the neck, the region of the occipital area. Now, the vagus nerve, which we said in one of our videos there, is directly related, to our eyes, to the ringing in our ears. And when we're getting ringing in our ears, we're calcifying. The excess estrogen is actually calcifying the vagus nerve, which is the tinnitus or the ringing of the ears, or the plaque buildup, that's in the eye itself, and so on.
That's
It
the
also
glaucoma and the pressure in the eye, glaucoma or macula, or the cataracts. It's the bone of the skull. It's the osteoporosis of the bones of the skull, and then the hardening or the pinching on the vagus nerve, affecting the vagus nerve to the eyes, to the ears, to the throat. So anybody that's having constriction in the throat, tightness, difficulty swallowing, it all has to do with that pinching on the vagus nerve, or the calcification, as Jeff was sharing, and the hardening, as well as the skull itself.
So, and that goes all the way down to the lower back, through all the glands, the kidneys, the pancreas, all the way down to the colon, and directly down into to the sacrum, as above, so below. So as it goes into the sacrum, it's the S1, S2, and S3 that Dr. Stone's talking about. He said the upper portion of gludi is also supplied by the 3 sacral parasympathetic nerves. These must be balanced with the upper parasympathetic, as of the vagus nerve. So he's saying as above, so below. So as above is the vagus nerve, right, which is right at the top where your occiput is, where the cervicals are, okay, in the back of the neck, okay. And that's what he says here. He said the upper portion of the parasympathetic nerves of the vagus nerve, the neck region, and the occipital area, that's the back of the neck, that's where your head attaches to. Also the spinal accessory over the shoulders. So that's where, like when you get a lot of gas, and you're burping, and you're tightening up in the shoulder blades like that, and the gas can't get released. That's the gas pressure coming from the calcification, from the vagus nerve calcifying, and the gas not being able to be exhaled out as you're exhaling the carbon dioxide. Then he says the sympathetic current must also be coordinated with this as the parasympathetic. So sympathetic is your drive, your outgoing drive, like the horse running for the back of the buttock, running forward. The parasympathetic is sleep, consciousness, meditation, healing. So then he says the sympathetic current must be coordinated with this as the parasympathetic. Emotional outlets can only when nature, the sympathetic nervous system, responds. So we're unable to respond with our emotion. That's getting the energy out, to share our feelings, to dance, to sing, all these things that are being suppressed. So then that sympathetic drive are able to move and be creative, to express itself, dance, sing, and and like that's being suppressed. And that's so important with our emotions. That's the reason emotion is blocked right now, and creating all this situation of fear. And we're saying, please, let's sing, let's share, let's be courageous. This is the key to the mental, emotional, functional treatment for frustration. So that's what we're experiencing right now. The glute muscle must be balanced with the feet, especially the sore spots on the soles and the tendons of the toes, as well as the fixation of the transverse arch. The springing step, that spring in your step, the youthful step as we walk or we run. The glutamate region must be preserved and maintained with balancing with the upper supply in this region. True natural healing is done with a means of balancing the parasympathetic and the sympathetic, the love and the caring and the spirit. So this is what we've been sharing in this situation. So now how do we activate that? Well, how we activate that is we have the bone itself, and we use the example of the knee. The knee there is a bone, and remember the bone marrow is what, right?
It's the patella bone.
Yeah. You explain that about the knee, right?
The patella bone of the knee cap. So the kneecap, the patella, that's where we've been suggesting for people to use castor oil and aloe vera gel, as aloe vera is full of lysine. It's one of the healing plants. I mean, Cleopatra would use aloe vera and bathe in aloe vera, just like she bathed in goat's milk. So these are very old remedies. And using the castor oil, which is called castor for palm of Christ, palm of Christi, palm of Christ,
Yes.
mixing the two together and rubbing it into the tops of your knees, the patella bone. Behind the patella, there are over 40 stem cells. Remember, the beginning of the immune system is the bone marrow. We're regenerating through the amino acids, the bone marrow, the cerebral spinal fluid from the sacrum, from the gluteus maximus, from the sympathetic drive, the storehouse, the vital reserve in the sacrum, the dura mater. By stimulating the knees and the stem cells behind the patella, we're also stimulating the dura mater through the amino acids, through the regeneration of the cerebral spinal fluid. That same fluid moving up the spine is the same fluid in the bone marrow. So the kneecaps, the patella behind, there's over 40 stem cells. The dura mater, the vital reserve in your sacrum, the cerebral spinal fluid moving up the spine, that same fluid within the bone marrow to turn over the stem cells, the T cells, the natural killer cells, the platelets, red and white blood cells. From the villi, which Jeff talked about, the same villi of the bone, the villi of the small intestine to absorb your nutrients into the bloodstream, and the villi of your lungs to absorb the oxygen.
So what Lorraine's actually explaining there is the process of the regeneration of the bone marrow. Now, that helps very much with the parasympathetic. And now we want to activate the sympathetic. So right in the hip goes directly into the parasympathetic to the S1, S2, S3. When we put the castor pack there in the heat, draws that directly in, or the aloe vera with the castor oil, which rehydrates. We need the cholesterol to rehydrate and manufacture through the skin, through the lymph, so that the stem cells can start to vibrate. And so then now what we're suggesting and what we've been doing is to get the sympathetic, the lower part, the tailbone, get the circulation, remove the frustration, get the energy, move forward, gain the courage, get the circulation back up to the brain, is we've been taking and doing the castor pack from the buttock line, the actual buttock itself, that good vital gluteus maximus, that muscle, which is what moves us forward, what the horse runs from. That's the sympathetic drive. That's the S4 and S5, which is what Dr. Stone's talking about. That's what we all need right now dramatically with everything that's being contracted. So then be able to put the castor pack there and then go up to the hip to recover the gluteus max muscle to the hip itself, which regenerates the bone marrow from the parasympathetic nerve. So we're able to cover both. So we're doing the foundation. So one day you would do the castor pack on the buttock line to the hip, and then the one side. Then the next day you would do the other side, do the hip, and over to the buttock muscle. So you take care of both sides and go across directly up to our shoulders, the brachial plexus. That's the gravity field, as Dr. Stone would talk about, into the brachial plexus itself. And then the next night we would do the castor pack in the back of the neck, where the cranial bones, the occiput is, and that activates the vagus nerve. So you're carrying the triangle from the vagus nerve and the occiput directly down to the hips, you see, and then we're taking each hip and the triangle that moves back up. So we're balancing as above, so below. And that strengthens our immune system, strengthens our muscle tissue, strengthens our body's immune system, and just strengthen ourselves so we can regenerate and deal with all the compression, that's occurring right now. And that's utilizing the amino acids in our where we utilize them to activate our immune system. And doing this process right now will help all of us strengthen and build up new tissue, even though we have old tissue. By manufacturing new tissue in the liver and different parts of the body, we can take the old, strengthen that, remove the old toxin out as we're activating new cells. And then we can have an old problem. So this process, we activate regeneration, and then we can take this regeneration and take care of old symptoms that we've had, become youthful, and walk and run and feel, joy in our life and a level of spirit and love and caring in our heart for other people and ourselves and everyone we were close to.
So there's ways to exercise the vagus nerve, and there's ways to release the emotion, and that's dancing, that's singing. That's the treatments that we're talking about with the castor oil and the aloe, with the castor oil packs, putting it on the gluteus maximus around to the hip. Obviously, breathing is a very essential part of being able to release and being able to express and be creative. So that's, the belly breathing, or just, getting out, being in nature, or being by the ocean, being out in the sunlight, looking at the birds. All of these things help us to balance, because it's nature that does the curing, balancing ourselves one with nature, understanding that everything we're teaching is connected to nature, as we are a representation of nature from within out, from the head down, from above below, from above below to below above. So it's just balancing us all and bringing us one in balance with nature. Thanks everybody for taking the time to listen to our podcast today, and we wish you all lots of love and lots of, moving forward. Just got to keep on moving forward.
One of the things that doing this podcast for you is that you can now actually really a lot of very good information. You can now listen to this and stop, and again listen to it on, when you're driving or when you're home or anytime, and then go on and listen to another part. That's the beauty of podcasting is that you can actually focus on certain parts and then go on to the next part when you have time to do that. That's the reason we wanted to offer this podcast to you, so that you could have this information and you could listen to it at your leisure when you have time. Thank you very much. We really care for you, and God bless you all.